Every morning, before the sun fully rises, before the city begins to speak in loud voices, before the traffic fills the streets with restless movement, there is a quiet moment, a moment that belongs only to those who wake up early enough to notice it. A moment when the world feels slower, softer, almost as if it is still half asleep. In a small town somewhere on the United States, there is an old man who has lived inside that quiet moment for more than 30 years. His name is Walter. He is not famous. He has never written a book. He has never appeared on television. There is nothing about him that would make people stop and look twice, unless they happen to be awake. At the same time, he steps outside his front door because every morning, at exactly 6:10 a.m., old Walter opens his door, steps onto the small wooden porch, and begins the same walk, on the same street. He has walked for 3 decades. It is not a long street. In fact, many people would not even notice it. It has no famous shops, no busy cafes, no bright signs calling for attention, just a line of modest houses, a few old trees, and a sidewalk that has quietly held the footsteps of thousands of mornings. To most people, it is just an ordinary place. But to Walter, it is something else entirely. It is a map of his life. He adjusts his jacket as he steps outside. Even in summer, he always brings it with him. Not because he's cold, but because he has learned that mornings can be unpredictable. He closes the door gently behind him. He always does it gently, as if there is someone still sleeping inside, even though the house has been quiet for many years now. For a brief moment, he stands still, not moving, not thinking, just breathing. The air is cool. There is a faint smell of grass and something distant, like fresh bread from a bakery that opens early. Walter takes his first step, and just like that, the walk begins again. The same path, the same rhythm, the same quiet companionship between him and the street. If you were to watch him from a distance, you might think there is nothing special about what he is doing. An old man walking slowly, hands behind his back, eyes looking ahead, but also somehow looking into the past. But if you walked beside him, if you stayed long enough, you would begin to notice something different. Because Walter does not just walk through the street, he remembers it. Every house, every tree, every crack in the sidewalk. They all carry a story. There is a small blue house on the corner. 30 years ago, a young couple moved in there. Walter remembers the day they arrived. He remembers the way they laughed as they carried boxes into their new home. He remembers thinking, they are just beginning. Now, the paint on the house is slightly faded. The trees in the yard have grown taller, and the young couple are no longer young. Sometimes, when Walter walks past, he still sees them sitting on their porch, quieter now, slower. And when their eyes meet, they nod to each other. No words, just a simple understanding shared between people who have watched time move from the same place. Walter continues walking. A few steps later, he passes a lamppost. It looks ordinary, old, a little rusted near the bottom. But for Walter, this is where his son once stood, waiting for the school bus. It was winter, cold enough that their breath turned into small clouds in the air. His son had complained that morning about the cold, about school, about everything. Walter had laughed. Someday, he said, you'll miss even this. At the time, it felt like just another sentence, something parents say without thinking too much about it. But now, as Walter slows down near that same lamppost, he realizes it was true. He does miss it, not just the moment, but the feeling of it, the sound of his son's voice, the way the morning felt full, without needing anything more. Walter does not stop walking, but for a second, his steps become slower, as if he is walking through memory instead of the present. Further down the street, there is a small tree. It was once just a thin, fragile thing, barely tall enough to notice. Walter remembers when it was planted. A little girl had helped her father dig the hole. She had been so proud, holding the small shovel with both hands, as if she were doing something very important. Now, that tree stands strong, its branches wide, its leaves full, and the little girl is no longer a child. Walter has seen her grow, year after year, morning after morning. He has seen her walk to school, then to high school, then leave, and sometimes return, with stories written in her eyes. He never spoke to her much, just a few small greetings over the years. But still, he feels like he knows something about her life, because he was there, not in the center of her story, but quietly, on the side, watching it unfold. And this is what his walks have always been, not just movement, but witnessing, a quiet way of being present in a world that is always changing. The sky is brighter now. The sun begins to rise behind the houses, casting long, gentle shadows across the street. A car passes by, someone heading to work, in a hurry. They do not notice Walter, and that is okay. Walter does not need to be noticed. He has something else, something many people lose without even realizing it. He has time, not more time than others, but a different relationship with it. He does not rush it. He does not fight it. He walks with it, step by step, morning after morning, year after year, 30 years of the same street, and yet never the same walk. Because every day, something is slightly different. A new leaf on a branch, a new crack in the sidewalk, a new face passing by. Or sometimes, an old face that has not been seen in a long time. And every time, Walter notices, not in a loud way, not in a way that demands attention, but in a quiet, steady, deep way, as if he understands something simple and very important, that life is not only made of big moments, it is made of small ones, repeated again and again, until they become something meaningful. Walter reaches the end of the street. He pauses for a moment. This is where he always turns around, not because he has to, but because this is how the walk has always been. And some things do not need to change to remain beautiful. He looks back down the street, the same houses, the same trees, the same quiet path, waiting for his return. Walter takes a slow breath, and then he begins to walk back. And the second half of the journey, just as important, just as familiar, just as full of quiet meaning. Because sometimes the most peaceful life is not the one that changes everything, but the one that gently notices everything that changes. The second half of Walter's walk is never just a return. It may look like he's simply going back home, following the same sidewalk, passing the same houses, seeing the same trees from a different angle. But for Walter, the walk back is something quieter, something deeper. It is where reflection begins. The sun has now risen a little higher. The soft blue of early morning slowly turns into warm gold. Light touches the windows of the houses, one by one, like a gentle hand waking them up. Walter notices how the light changes everything. A house that looked quiet and cold just minutes ago now feels warm and alive. A tree that seemed still and dark now glows with soft color, and Walter thinks, how strange it is that nothing has actually changed, and yet everything feels different. He continues walking, his steps steady, his breathing calm. There is no hurry in him. He has nowhere else to be. And perhaps that is why he is able to truly be here. A few houses down, a door opens suddenly. A young woman steps out, holding a cup of coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. She looks tired. Her eyes are not fully awake yet, but her day has already begun. She walks quickly toward her car, scrolling through something on her screen. Walter slows down slightly, not to interrupt her, but simply to observe. He has seen this many times before. Different people, same movement, same quiet urgency. The young woman glances up for a brief second. Their eyes meet. Walter gives a small nod. She hesitates, then gives a quick smile back, before continuing on her way. It is a very small moment. So small. Most people would forget it instantly. But Walter carries it with him, like a soft note in a long song. Because to him, these moments matter. Not because they are important, but because they are real. Further along the street, there is a small mailbox, slightly leaning to one side. It has been that way for years. Walter remembers when it was new, straight, bright, perfectly placed. Now, time has gently pushed it off balance, not enough to break it, but enough to show that time always leaves its mark. Walter pauses for just a second, looking at it. And then, almost without thinking, he reaches out and gently straightens it. Not completely, just a little. Enough to help it stand, with a bit more dignity. He smiles softly. It is a quiet act. No one sees it, but it feels right. And in that moment, Walter realizes something simple, something he has come to understand more clearly, with each passing year, that even the smallest actions can be a form of care, not only for others, but for the world around us. He continues walking. The street is slowly waking up now. A dog barks in the distance. A car engine starts. A window opens. Life begins to move, a little faster. But Walter's pace does not change. It remains steady, unhurried, as if he is walking in a different rhythm, one that does not follow the noise of the world, but the quiet beat inside him. As he approaches the middle of the street again, he notices something new, a small cardboard box, placed carefully near the edge of the sidewalk. It wasn't there yesterday. Walter stops. He looks around, but no one is nearby. He steps closer, slowly, with curiosity rather than concern. Inside the box, there are a few books, all old books, some with worn covers, some with pages slightly bent at the corners. On the side of the box, there is a small handwritten sign. Free. Take one if you'd like. Walter reads it twice, then, very gently, he reaches into the box. His fingers move across the covers, pausing, feeling the texture of paper and time. He picks up one book. It is simple, nothing special at first glance. But when he opens it, he notices something, a name written inside, and a date, many years ago. Walter closes the book slowly. He holds it in his hands, as if it carries more than just words. Because in a way, it does. It carries a life, a memory, a piece of someone else's story. He looks back at the box. For a moment, he considers leaving it. After all, he does not need another book. His house already has many. But then, he thinks about something, about how this book once belonged to someone, about how it traveled through time, and somehow, ended up here, on this exact morning, in front of him. And quietly, he understands. This is not just coincidence, this is part of the walk, part of the rhythm that has guided him here, day after day, for 30 years. Walter places the book under his arm, not as something he owns, but as something he has been given for now. He continues walking. The street feels slightly different now, not because it has changed, but because something inside him has shifted. A small addition to a life already full of quiet details. As he nears his house, the familiar shape of his porch comes into view, the same wooden steps, the same door, waiting for him, just as it always does. Walter slows down, not because he is tired, but because he knows the walk is ending, and endings, even small ones, deserve to be noticed. He reaches the door, pauses, then turns around one last time. The street stretches out before him, now brighter, busier, more awake. It no longer belongs only to the quiet morning. It belongs to everyone now. Walter smiles gently because he knows something others may not realize. That before all of this movement, before the noise, before the rush, there were the moment of stillness, and he was there, walking through it, living inside it. He opens the door, steps inside, closes it softly behind him. The house is quiet again, but this time, it feels a little different. Because now, there is a book resting on the table, a new story, waiting to be opened. And tomorrow morning, at exactly 6:10 a.m., Walter will step outside again. Not because he has to, but because something in him has learned that meaning is not something we find once. It is something we return to again and again and again. The next morning, Walter wakes up a little earlier than usual, not because he has something urgent to do, but because something small and quiet is waiting for him. The book. It rests on the table, exactly where he placed it the day before. He had not opened it again after returning home, not because he forgot, but because he prefers to let things arrive slowly. Walter has learned that some things feel more meaningful when they are not rushed. He sits down. The chair makes a soft sound beneath him, a familiar sound, one that has been part of his mornings for many years. He places his hand gently on the cover of the book. For a moment, he does nothing, just sits and feels the quiet presence of it, as if the book is not just an object, but a small doorway waiting to be opened. And then, slowly, he lifts the cover. The pages are slightly yellowed. They carry the soft scent of time. Walter turns the first page. There is the name again, written in careful handwriting, and below it, a short sentence, not printed, written by hand. To whoever finds this, I hope it keeps you company. Walter reads it once, then again. His fingers rest gently on the page. There is something about the words, something simple, but deeply human. A quiet offering, a small connection between someone in the past and someone in the present. Walter closes the book slowly, not because he is finished, but because he understands something. This book is not meant to be read quickly. It is meant to be lived with. He stands up, puts on his jacket, and prepares for his walk. At exactly 6:10 a.m., the door opens. The morning air greets him again, cool, soft, familiar. But today, there is something slightly different. Walter notices it immediately. The air feels a little warmer. The sky holds a hint of soft pink near the horizon. Spring is beginning to arrive. It does not announce itself loudly. It does not demand attention. It simply appears. Walter steps onto the sidewalk. The walk begins again, but today he is carrying something with him, not in his hands. The book remains on the table, but in his mind, in his awareness, he is carrying the feeling of those words. I hope it keeps you company. Walter repeats the sentence quietly as he walks, and for the first time in a long while, he asks himself something new. What does it mean to keep someone company? He has spent many years walking alone, not lonely, but alone. There is a difference. Loneliness feels empty, like something is missing, but being alone can feel full, full of space, full of thought, full of quiet presence. Walter has always been comfortable in that space, but now, as he walks past the first house, he begins to wonder, has he also been keeping company without realizing it? The blue house appears again. The couple is already outside today, sitting side by side, each holding a warm cup. Walter slows slightly, and their eyes meet. This time, the man lifts his hand in a small wave. Walter responds the same way, a simple gesture, but something about it feels a little different today, a little more present, as if both sides understand that even small connections matter. Walter continues walking. The lamppost comes into view. He pauses there, just for a moment. The memory of his son is still there. It has not faded. But today, it feels softer, less like something lost, and more like something that still exists in a different form. Walter places his hand lightly on the lamppost, not holding it, just touching it, as if acknowledging that this place still holds something meaningful. He moves on, and the small tree further down the street catches his attention again. But today, there is something new, a small sign, placed carefully in the ground beside it. Planted 30 years ago. Walter stops. He looks at the tree, then at the sign, then back at the tree. 30 years, the same number, the same length of time. He has been walking this street. A quiet smile appears on his face, because suddenly, he realizes something he had never fully seen before. He did not just walk beside the tree, he grew with it, year after year, season after season, both of them, changing slowly, in ways that are almost impossible to notice, day by day, but over time, becoming something entirely different. Walter steps closer. He reaches out and gently touches the bark. It feels strong, steady, alive. He nods slightly, as if greeting an old friend. Then he continues walking. Further ahead, the street begins to fill with more people. A man jogging, a woman walking her dog, a child riding a bicycle. Different lives, different stories, all moving through the same space. Walter watches them, but today, he does something he rarely does. He speaks first. "Good morning," he says gently, to the woman with the dog. She looks surprised for a second, then smiles. "Good morning." Her voice is warm. The dog looks up at Walter, curious, but calm. Walter continues walking. His steps feel the same, but something inside him feels slightly more open, as if a small door has quietly unlocked. He reaches the end of the street again, stops, turns around, the familiar movement, the familiar pause. But today, he takes a little more time before walking back. He looks at the street, not just as a place, but as something more, a collection of moments, of lives, of quiet connections, and he realizes that for 30 years, he has not just been walking alone, he has been walking alongside everything: the people, the houses, the seasons, even time itself. Walter takes a deep breath, then begins the walk back. The sun is higher now, the light stronger, the world is fully awake. But inside Walter, there is still that quiet morning feeling, that slow rhythm, that awareness that even the smallest moments can carry meaning. As he approaches his house, he feels something new. Not excitement, not urgency, but a gentle curiosity. Because today, when he steps inside, there is a book waiting for him. And not just a book, but a voice, a presence, a reminder that even in the quietest lives, we are never truly alone. Walter reaches his door, pauses, looks once more at the street, then steps inside. The house welcomes him with silence. But now, that silence feels different. Not empty, but shared, as if somewhere between the pages of a book and the rhythm of a daily walk, a new kind of companionship has quietly begun. That afternoon, the light in Walter's house feels softer than usual. It moves slowly across the floor, touching the edges of furniture, resting quietly on the table, where the book still waits. Walter does not rush to it. Instead, he makes himself a cup of tea. He follows the same small routine he has followed for years. Fill the kettle, wait for the gentle sound of water beginning to warm. Place the cup carefully on the table. There is comfort in repetition, not because it is exciting, but because it is steady. And in a world that changes so quickly, steady things become something valuable. Walter sits down. The book is in front of him. This time, he opens it again. Slowly, the pages move with a soft, dry sound. He turns past the first page, past the handwritten message, and into the story itself. The words are simple, not complicated, not dramatic, just a quiet story about a man who traveled from one place to another without ever truly knowing what he was looking for. Walter reads a few lines, then stops, not because he is tired, but because something in the story feels familiar. The idea of searching without knowing why, the feeling of moving without always understanding the direction. Walter closes the book gently. He leans back in his chair. His eyes drift toward the window. Outside, the world continues as it always does. Cars pass by. People move in and out of their homes. Life in its endless motion. And suddenly, Walter realizes something. For many years, he thought his walking was simply a habit, something he did to fill time. But now, he begins to see it differently. Maybe it was never just about the walking. Maybe it was also a kind of searching, not for something big, not for something dramatic, but for something quiet, something that cannot be found all at once, something that only reveals itself, little by little, over time. The next morning, Walter wakes up with that thought still resting gently in his mind. At 6:10 a.m., he steps outside again. But today, there is a small difference. He brings the book with him, not to read while walking. He knows that is not his way, but simply to carry it, as if it is now part of the journey. The morning air greets him once more, cool, calm, familiar. Walter begins his walk, the same street, the same rhythm. But today, he notices something new, not in the street itself, but in how he sees it. The blue house, the lamppost, the tree. They are no longer just places filled with memory. They feel connected, like parts of a larger story. a story that has been unfolding quietly for many years. Walter walks slowly. His hand rests lightly on the book, tucked under his arm. He does not think too much. He simply allows the walk to be what it is. When he reaches the blue house, something unexpected happens. The woman who lives there stands up and takes a few steps toward the sidewalk. "Good morning," she says gently. Her voice carries a softness that feels natural, unforced. Walter stops. "Good morning," he replies. There is a small pause, not uncomfortable, just quiet. Then she looks at the book in his hand. "Reading something new?" she asks. Walter glances down. "Yes, I found it yesterday." She smiles. "Sometimes the best things are the ones we don't look for." Walter nods slowly. "Yes, I think that's true." They stand there for a moment longer. Two people sharing a simple exchange in the middle of an ordinary morning. Then, with another small nod, Walter continues his walk. But something has shifted again. A conversation, a connection, small but real. As he walks further, he begins to understand something more clearly, that his presence on this street has not gone unnoticed. Even in silence, even without words, he has been part of this place, just as it has been part of him. The lamppost appears again. Walter slows down. But this time, he does not stop for long. The memory is still there, but it no longer holds him in place. Instead, it moves with him, like a quiet companion, walking beside him. Further down, the small tree stands strong in the morning light. Walter glances at it and continues. There is no need to pause today, because he already understands. Growth does not need to be observed every moment to be real. Some things simply continue, whether we watch them or not. As he approaches the middle of the street, he sees the box again, the one with the books. It is still there, but now there are fewer books inside. Walter stops. He looks at it quietly. Then, after a moment, he makes a decision. He takes the book from under his arm, holds it gently in his hands, then places it inside the box, not as something he is giving away, but as something he is returning to the flow of the world. Because he understands now, the book was never meant to stay with him forever. It was meant to pass through him, to bring a thought, a feeling, a small shift, and then to continue its journey. Walter looks at the box one last time, then continues walking. There is a lightness in his steps now, not because he has lost something, but because he has released it. And in doing so, he feels something deeper, a quiet sense of trust that not everything needs to be held to be meaningful. He reaches the end of the street, turns around, and begins walking back. The sun rises higher. The street becomes more alive, but Walter remains steady, calm, present. As he walks, he begins to notice something new, not in the street, not in the houses, but in himself. A gentle openness, a willingness to be part of something without needing to control it. When he finally reaches his house, he pauses at the door, as he always does. But today, there is one small difference. He does not look back immediately. Instead, he places his hand on the door and takes a slow breath. Then, he turns. The street stretches out before him, just as it always has. And yet, it feels new again. Walter smiles, because he understands now that the meaning of his walks was never hidden. It was always there, in every step, in every moment, in every quiet connection. He allowed himself to notice. He opens the door, steps inside, and this time, the house does not feel empty at all, because something inside him has quietly changed, not suddenly, not dramatically, but in the only way that truly lasts, slowly, gently, over time. The next morning arrives, as it always does, quietly, without asking for attention, without announcing itself, and yet, for Walter, it feels different. Not because the street has changed, not because something extraordinary is about to happen, but because something inside him is no longer the same. At exactly 6:10 a.m., he opens the door again, the familiar sound, the gentle movement. He steps outside and pauses, just for a moment. The air is softer now. Spring has fully arrived. There is a quiet warmth, resting in the breeze. Birds begin their morning songs. Not loud, not overwhelming, just enough to remind the world that a new day has begun. Walter takes a deep breath. For many years, this moment was simply the beginning of a routine. Now, it feels like something more, a choice, a quiet decision. To be present, to notice, to walk, not just with his feet, but with his awareness. He begins, the first step, just like every other day, and yet not the same at all, because this time, he is not walking out of habit. He is walking with intention. The street greets him again, the blue house, the lamppost, the tree, all still there, all quietly continuing their place in the world. But Walter does not rush past them anymore. Even in his slow pace, he allows each one to exist without needing to hold on to it. When he reaches the blue house, the couple is there again. But today, something new happens. The man speaks first. "You walk every morning, don't you?" Walter stops. He smiles gently. "Yes, for many years." The man nods. "I've seen you more times than I can count." There is a pause, then the woman adds softly, "It's comforting, in a way." Walter looks at them, not surprised, not confused, just aware. Because now, he understands. His presence, even in silence, has been part of their mornings too. "Thank you," he says quietly. They exchange a small smile. Nothing more is needed. Walter continues walking, but something inside him feels warm. Not pride, not excitement, just a quiet sense of connection. He walks past the lamppost. He does not stop today, but he glances at it with a soft expression, not holding on to the past, but honoring it. Further ahead, the tree stands in full leaf, green, alive, reaching upward. Walter slows slightly, not to examine it, but simply to walk beside it with awareness. He understands now. Growth does not ask for attention. It happens, whether we notice it or not. But noticing it makes us part of it. As he approaches the middle of the street, he looks toward the box. It is still there, but the book he returned is gone. Walter smiles, and not because he misses it, but because it means someone else has taken it. Someone else is now holding those same words. "I hope it keeps you company." And in that moment, Walter feels something deep and simple. He was never meant to keep the book. He was meant to continue the circle, to receive, to reflect, to release, just like his walks, just like life. He reaches the end of the street again. But today, he does not turn immediately. Instead, he stands there a little longer. The world is waking up around him. Cars begin to move, voices begin to rise. The quiet moment is slowly fading. But Walter does not feel like he is losing it, because now he carries that quiet inside him. He turns. What begins the walk back, the final stretch. as it has always been. But something about this morning feels complete, not like an ending, but like a circle, gently closing and opening again at the same time. As he walks, he notices something he has never fully seen before. Not a house, not a tree, but the space between things, the pauses, the silence, the moments where nothing happens. And suddenly, he understands something that cannot be explained with many words. That life is not only in the events, it is also in the spaces between them. And those spaces are where peace lives. Walter reaches his house, the porch, the door, everything as it has always been. He places his hand on the handle, then stops. Just for a second, he turns and looks at the street one last time, not because it is the final walk. Tomorrow, he will walk again, and the day after that, as long as he can. But today, he sees it clearly, not just as a street, but as a companion, a quiet witness to his life. And he has been a quiet witness to it. Walter smiles, then he speaks softly, not to anyone in particular, but to the moment itself. Thank you. He opens the door, steps inside, and closes it gently behind him. The house is quiet, but it is not empty, because now Walter understands something simple and deeply true. Happiness does not always come from big changes. It doesn't always arrive with loud moments or dramatic events. Sometimes it comes from walking the same path again and again and again until one day you realize you were never just walking. You were living slowly, fully, quietly. And that is enough. If this story brought you a sense of calm, if it helped you slow down, even for a few moments, then you are already part of this journey. Take a deep breath. Give yourself permission to move a little slower today. And if you'd like more gentle stories like this to help you relax and improve your English naturally, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Stay with us for more slow English stories, more quiet reflections, and more moments that remind you life does not need to be fast to be meaningful.